And live now to Des Moines, Iowa, where New Jersey Senator and presidential candidate Cory Booker is just about to speak. This event being hosted by the Iowa Democratic Black Party, or the Iowa Democratic Party Black Caucus, I should say. It's getting underway right now. You're watching live Road to the White House coverage here on C-SPAN.
Ladies and gentlemen, for your pleasure, all the way from New Jersey, bringing you the dynamic, the didactic individual that is running for President of the United States, Senator Cory Booker.
All right. Y'all sit down. Woo. All right. Listen. This is exciting for me. Oh, thank you. All right, this is very, very exciting to me. I'll tell you what, I have been all over Iowa. I actually flew into Nebraska, drove up to Sioux City. I've been through Ames. I've been through Carroll. I've been through Nevada. My mom lives in Nevada, but I was in Nevada. But when I come to Des Moines, I may be from Jersey, but this is my home. And this is the city I grew up knowing. I remember my first time coming here. My grandfather and grandmother drove me out to Des Moines in their big SUV. They called it the Green Dream because it was painted green. And it was one of the earliest family reunions I came to because my family is from Des Moines. And I have a lot of family members in this room, which is exciting to me, and I'm really grateful for them. But I always have to point out one. I always have to single out one because it is my grandmother's first cousin. She is the matriarch of my family. If you want to know who I am, you get to know her. And she is sitting here with a crown on her head because I may be turning 50, but she just turned 100. My Aunt Alma. Woo. She makes 100 look good. So I am blessed. My cup runneth over. And I need this energy. It is incredible. So I want to put some thank yous out to Jamie Woods, Michelle Elliott. These are folks who have hosted me here, and what Jamie's doing as head of this Black Caucus, it's impressive to me. And I want to thank them. Would you give Jamie a round of applause, please? Jamie has treated me like a brother, too. We are not, I don't think we're blood, although we haven't tested our DNA yet. But she has treated me like a family since I was coming out, even before I was a presidential candidate. And her allowing me to have this forum with you tonight is incredibly kind to me, and it gives me a chance for us to talk about the issues. And Michelle, where's Michelle? Okay, Michelle's at the signing table. There she is. I want to thank her, too, as well. And y'all want to know there are legislators all throughout this country. I'm getting to be really close with them. We're getting the first legislative endorsements coming out of New Hampshire, the first legislative endorsements coming out of South Carolina, really people. But one of the guys that has blown me away of the people I've met on this journey, who I didn't know before I got involved, but has really shown me a level of spiritual light and leadership that inspires me to be the kind of president that I know we need in this country, is a representative in this state, and his name is Akeo. Would you please give him love? Incredible man. And where did Bomay go? Where did she go? There you are. It's not even, April 27th is my birthday, but you just made me, even though I'm turning 50, you made me feel young. And I just want to thank you for that incredible endorsement that you gave me. I'm going to see if I can change the law to see if you can caucus for me too. But thank you very much for lifting me up tonight. I really appreciate it. All right. So, I am a guy who grew up with a family from this great state. And as much as my family and my grandmother born and raised in Des Moines, we are actually from a place called Buxton. Yes. And Buxton, Iowa, was a special place that has been written about in a number of books. Some folks call it a utopia because it was a place where black folk, former slaves or descendants from slaves, met with immigrant folk from Eastern and Western Europe, and they came together in a mining town here in this great state, and they descended into the earth, black and white together, to scratch from the earth a better life for themselves and a better future for the kids. Think about this country. In this area here in this state, a state that's been ahead of the times on a lot of things. Folk didn't wait for abolition in this state. There were underground railroad passages, spurs going right through this state. Gave women the right to vote before the rest of the country caught up. Even on LGBTQ rights, y'all had to beat the rest of this country because you all were showing the Iowa way. The Iowa way, despite bigotry and hate, which are always going to be weeds that need to be pulled from the garden of democracy, the truth is, this is a state that has always tried to be more about inclusion, more about a democratic ideals, and I've benefited from that. The stories from Buxton were the stories of my family. And this is the state that gave my family a shot at the middle class. By the time my grandmother was born here in Des Moines, she had two parents that worked jobs with dignity and respect. Yes, my great-grandfather was a janitor at a bank here in Des Moines, and my great-grandmother cleaned office buildings, but those were respected jobs. You could earn a living, you could raise a family. Because we come from a nation where generations ago, if you were willing to work hard and play by the rules, one job was enough, you could raise a family and your kids would have a better life than you. In fact, 90% of baby boomers, my mom's generation, 90% did better than their parents did. Even if you were African American like my father was born in the Deep South, poor. He used to say, son, I couldn't afford to be poor. I was just po, P-O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. Don't tell people I was poor, I was just a po-bo. There was a pathway in this country. My grandfather, who married my grandmother, they moved to Detroit. My grandfather worked on the assembly lines. He was a UAW worker. Jobs had dignity. And whatever you want to say about Ford, he made a statement. He was going to pay people enough so that they can buy the products that they were making. Imagine that. We now have people that work. One of my friends, she works in an IHOP. She needs food stamps because she can't afford to feed her family because wages have gone straight down. We've gone from a generation that was doing so much, building this country, investing in the things that mattered. Education, training, infrastructure, research and development, the things that actually grow our economy, to go from a generation there to a generation that's turned its back on our heritage and our history. We had a nation that had the best infrastructure on the planet Earth in my dad's generation. We've trashed it and are about to hand over to our kids at $3 trillion, $2 trillion of infrastructure debt. China has built 18,000 miles of high-speed rail, and the busiest rail corridor in this country that goes from Boston to Washington, D.C. runs a half an hour slower than it did in the 1960s. The minimum wage, in my dad's era, you were above the poverty line. The minimum wage now, you are not above the poverty line. There's not a county in America where you can raise a family on a minimum wage job where you can afford a two-bedroom apartment. Not a county in America. What have we done to strip the dignity from work? What have we done to take our national heritage? Our public school systems used to be ranked the #1 on the planet Earth. We were the best education nation. We opened up through our public schools gateways to a thriving country. But now what have we done? I see what's going on in your state. The schemes that are attacks on public education, attacks on public school teachers, attacks on their right to unionize. And then other countries who saw us smartly, they said, hey, what works in our country, we know that the most valuable natural resource a nation has is the genius of its children. So we're not going to just do K through 12. I know there's some kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers here that know our kids are showing up already behind because other nations have universal preschool. They have affordable childcare. They have paid family leave. We are a nation that doesn't have those things. And then when it comes to higher ed, we used to lead the country, lead the planet Earth on the percentage of our population graduating from college. Well, guess what we've done to the cost of college? We've jacked it way up. Other countries are scratching their head looking at America. You have over there in Germany, the cost of college is between 0 and 4% of the median income for a family. In Canada, it's like 7% for a median candidate. Trudeau. Here in America, more than 52% of the median income for a family. Back in my dad's era, a Pell Grant covered about 85% of the cost of college. Now a Pell Grant's barely not even going to get you to 20% of the cost. And so where has all our money gone, somebody might ask? Because we're trillions of dollars worth of debt. Where's our money gone here in America? Has it gone to support public education? Has it gone to support our infrastructure? No. This young lady said it right here. This person over here stood on my left. She said, military. We've gone to wars we should not have been in, and it's gone to tax cuts for the wealthiest of the wealthy of Americans. This is tax filing time. You know how many corporations there are that paid 0 in taxes? Well, if any of you tried to do that right now, they'd come after you. We've kicked our national wealth up to military engagements we shouldn't have been in, and to the tax cuts for the wealthiest. This last tax bill that Trump passed was another thing that, hey, if we just give the wealthiest Americans tax breaks, the theory was that somehow it's going to trickle down to us and grow our economy, and the tax cuts will pay for themselves. Well, they're not paying for themselves. And so this is what frustrates me. If I'm in a Republican audience, Democratic audience, most Americans know we're not investing in infrastructure. We've got to do something about it. You folks, I just drove through Iowa. I met with the school students who are competing against kids from Asia and Europe who have universal broadband access. We don't have it in our communities. Heck, my cell phone calls dropped about 17 times on the way here. We need to have a president that stands up and says, I'm not going to give more tax cuts to the wealthy. I'm going to invest in the things that grow our economy, which are people, which is education, which is infrastructure, broadband access, water systems, the kind of stuff we know grows our country. And I'll tell you what, we need to invest in a healthcare system. We have the most expensive healthcare system on the planet Earth. And it creates the worst outcomes of any industrial nation. Think about this. Let's design a system that's the most expensive on the planet Earth. We pay about 17, 18% of our GDP. The closest country spends 12%. So we're spending like $1 trillion more than any other country there is. And by the way, we're going to create that system. And unlike these other countries, everybody won't have access. We're going to make a lot of people, millions of Americans, have no health care. And we're going to make people that have health care. I've talked to people all throughout Iowa this last 2 days who are telling me I pay $800 in premiums. I'm not even sick. Just to hold on. And then when I get sick, I can barely afford my prescription drug. We're going to change this and make sure that everybody in America knows that health care is a right in America. And so we're going to do a lot of things when I'm president of the United States to get back to focusing on what matters in our nation. You invest in people, in job training, in education. You invest in people, in their health care. You give people security in their housing. You give people retirement security. That's what builds the bedrock of a great society. And you stop doing the things that are so much more expensive. You know what's really more expensive, which drive costs in our country? Is that we have a system that says to people, well, if you're sick, don't go to a doctor until it gets really bad. We have a system that treats disease and illness and injury, not the cheaper way of doing it, which is about preventative care, early detection, well-being. We have a system that likes to do things on the back end of the problem. How do we treat mental illness in America? Horribly. We don't. The biggest facilities for people with mental illness in the country, you know what they are? Prisons. Prisons. We put people in prison and jail, which is the most expensive way to deal with that issue, and then we don't treat them. We do things to them in prison and jail that compound their problems, like put them in solitary confinement. How do we deal with addiction in America? This is going to be a theme, isn't it? You go to our prisons and jails, that's where we're treating mental illness. That's where we're treating addiction. And then what do we do to folks when they come out of prison? Because most people do. There were more marijuana convictions in 2017 than all violent crimes combined. Think about this now. Now you have a criminal conviction for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing. And now what do they do to you? What do they do to you? You come out, and can you get a job? Can you get a loan from a bank? Can you get a business license? In my state, I don't know your state's laws, but you can't even drive a taxi cab. Now, this is the thing that gets me about your state. You can't even vote for doing things that senators have admitted to doing, and presidents have admitted to doing, and Congress people have admitted to doing. On Alma, I'm pointing to myself, but I've never done those things, okay? This makes me very insecure when my family's here. I could see Aunt Alma going home. Cory was talking about his drug use. No, Aunt Alma, I did not. Don't call my mom. This is the beginning of my justice tour. Because we swear an oath to our flag. We stand with liberty and justice for who? All. Not just the wealthy people. All people. Not just people on the coasts. All people. And if we're going to talk about justice, we've got to talk about economic justice, criminal justice, environmental justice. And so tonight I want to answer all your questions, but I want you to know that the economic plans that I'm talking about are a massive $1 trillion plus rural infrastructure and overall infrastructure plan. It's about something called RISE credits, which means that we're going to, instead of giving tax cuts to the wealthiest, we're going to give tax cuts to working people where they're going to get much bigger earned income tax credits back. And then we're going to honor all types of work, because how many people here know folks like my mom who stayed home to take care of my father who had dementia and Parkinson's, but we don't value that work in this country? Those folks should get a tax credit too. I'm going to expand the earned income tax credit in a way that gives 150 million Americans a tax increase in their incomes by letting them get more money back from the federal government. We're going to create child savings accounts. Every child born in America should get $1,000 deposited, and then based upon your income every year, your family's income, you get deposits in those accounts. By the time you're 18, the lowest income Americans would have $50,000 to invest in a business, buy a home, or go to school, or go get training. Now, Columbia University said this would devastate poverty, would pull millions of Americans out of poverty. It would get rid of the overall wealth gap we have in our country. It would actually erase, Columbia University says it would erase the racial wealth gap in America, giving everybody a fair playing field. In healthcare, I believe that everyone should have healthcare. I believe the best system to getting there is Medicare for all, but any presidential candidate who wants to talk to you about Medicare for all should talk to you about what the pathway getting there is. And I think it should start with having Medicare for people who want it, by lowering Medicare eligibility to 55, by using our bargaining power to push down the cost of prescription drugs. And if drug companies in our country, if I'm president, if they raise their prices for a drug in our company, and then some other country they have lower drug prices, we're going to take away their patent and let generics come in and undercut them. In criminal justice, I'm done. I've got the only major bipartisan bill that's gone through Congress already, which was the First Step Act. I'm proud to have led that through Congress. It made the crack cocaine, powder cocaine disparity retroactive, which meant over 2,000 Americans are going to be liberated from prison. 96% of them are black and Latino, because folks in this room will know that that was a biased, bigoted law. We need to make this country have mandatory minimums. These mandatory minimums they put on are so biased as well. I'm going to make sure that when people get out of jail, they don't have to check that box for the biggest employer in this country, which is the federal government and contractors. If you just push that back into the end of hiring after a person's got an offer for the job, you increase their possibility of being hired over 50%. We need to have, people don't realize that women incarcerated, over 1 out of every 3 incarcerated women on the planet Earth are in America. We're only 4% of the globe's population, but a third of all incarcerated women are in our country. And what we do to women in our country is unacceptable in prison. Over 80% are survivors of sexual trauma. And then the prison guards, we don't train them on how to deal with trauma-informed care. So they're walking in on women and doing things that compound their trauma. If I'm your president, we will make sure that we bring to this country a justice system that actually has true justice in it. But even more than that, this is my friend, she brought us together. This is a gathering to talk about issues facing the Black Caucus. I'm going to tell you right now, African-American men are 6% of the nation's population, but we make up the majority of homicide victims. I'm the only person running for president that has shootings in their neighborhood. I had a young person named Shahad Smith killed with an assault rifle at the top of my block last year. I'm done, enough. If I'm your president, I'm going to bring a fight to the NRA and anybody who wants to defend these loopholes like they've never seen before. Because thoughts and prayers are not enough. I'm tired of thoughts and prayers. And for the religious folks in this audience, faith without works is dead. And we're about time to have a leader in this country that's enough of the thoughts and prayers. It's going to come out hard and bring a fight. Because if those people who defend these loopholes, that you can be convicted of violence against your spouse and then still go out and use a loophole to go out and buy a weapon to kill them? States that have comprehensive background checks, violence against partners, against intimates, goes down over 40%. These are life-saving issues. So I want to get to everybody where you said, but I wanted to come out hard and tell you some of the policy stuff I'm fighting for, why I believe that justice and opportunity should be at the center of not just our pledge, but of why we work. But I want to wrap it all up by telling you why I am so excited to see this Des Moines crowd. Yes. Because it's rooms like this, with this kind of diversity. I see folks whose heritage go back to multiple continents. I might even see some Native American folks who've been here for a long time. Generations and generations going back into this soil of first Americans. But I want to tell you why I'm so excited about this crowd, not just because it's a Des Moines, Iowa crowd, not just because my family is here, but it's rooms like this that have changed America as I know it. And the story I've been telling to people all over Iowa is just a story of 1969 and my parents. I was just born that year, 50 years ago, April 27th. A couple months later, my parents were trying to move into New Jersey from the south, from the DC area. And when they showed up in places with great public schools, they happened to be white neighborhoods, and every time they would look at a home, the community would say, the real estate agent would say, I'm sorry, this house is sold. Or they make up lies, oh, this house has been pulled off the market. But what did they find? They found a group of Americans that met in a living room like this. It was mostly white folks, but there were some people of color there too. And these were people that said, this is not who we are as a country. This is not what we swear an oath to. And they took responsibility for setting up a sting operation. They worked with this group of lawyers and set up this sting operation. My parents would go look at a house, they would find out it was sold, they would leave, and the white couple volunteering would come behind them and look at the house and see immediately if it was really sold or not. And the real estate agent inevitably, or most times, would say, oh, it's still for sale. On the house I grew up in, my parents were told it was sold. The white couple came and found out it was still for sale. And so the white couple pretended they loved the house. They said, look at this house, it's so amazing. Look at the molding, that's the best molding I've ever seen. Whatever they said it was a great house. The grout job there, I just love that grout. I want to shout about your grout. And so they put a bid on the house. The bid was accepted. Papers were drawn up. And on the day of the closing in the real estate agent's office, the white couple did not show up. My father did. And a volunteer lawyer, this white guy from New Jersey. They walk into the real estate agent's office and you would think it was up, the jig is up, but no. The real estate agent sees them, is so surprised to see my dad, realizes he gets caught, and he doesn't say, "You got me." He actually gets angry and stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face. And then he sigs a dog on my dad. And let me tell you, every time my dad would tell this story as I was growing up, the dog would get bigger. When I was a young kid, my dad would look at me and said, "Boy, you better appreciate what you got. I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house." I'm here because of rooms like this, of Americans that didn't wait for change. They made the change. Of people that were impatient for change. We Americans are here for that. You think they waited for a bunch of guys to get together on the Senate floor in the early 1900s and said, "Fellas, it's time that women have the right to vote"? No. Change has never come from Washington. It comes to Washington by activists who are insisting and demanding and fighting for it. You all think it was Strom Thurmond that one day came to the Senate floor and said, "I've seen the light. Those Negro people should have some rights"? No. No, it was activists. Black folks and white folks, Christians, Jews, people from all backgrounds that did freedom rides, that did sit-ins. Sometimes they had to die together like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, black, white, Christian, and Jewish. And so for a family like mine, who taught me you can never pay it back, those family members that scrub toilets for you, clean floors for you, you can't pay it back. They wept for you, they struggled for you, they sacrificed. You can't pay it back. But you got to try to pay it forward. So as a guy who was fought for, his housing rights were fought for, what do you think my first job out of law school was? Going to Newark, New Jersey and fighting for the tenant rights of people in that community. I began to be a tenant organizer with the key word organize. When you organize folks, when you bring people, no matter how powerful they are, landlords with connections in City Hall, the power of the people is always greater than the people in power. And we started winning those battles. People in that community said, "You got to run for city council." I became a city council, became the mayor of the city. And then guess what? We organized folks in Newark. Uncommon coalitions produce uncommon results. I went to the Senate, reached across the aisle to pass bills like criminal justice reform. But I want to end the story with this. I got to the Senate and I did what many senators do that have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And if you're a guy with the name of Booker, that's a lot of pressure. But I had to fact check some of these stories. So I went back to try to find the head of the Fair Housing Council from the 1960s. You got the book. I went to go find the head of the Fair Housing Council from the 1960s. She was easy to find because she's still head of the Fair Housing Council today. Her name is Miss Lee Porter, and she is 82 years old. 92 years old, excuse me. 92. My Aunt Alma's like 92. Youngin'. Miss Lee Porter still leads the Fair Housing Council in Newark, in New Jersey, northern Jersey. She doesn't represent black families now. She represents same-sex couples. She represents Muslim families. She represents Americans with disabilities, because justice has no color, justice has no orientation, justice has no race. There is one justice for one nation. And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so I ask her, where are those lawyers? Can you introduce me to the lawyers that took a punch for my father, that stood up? And she introduces me to the lawyer who organized all the lawyers. I found him on the telephone. He was then 84 years old. He subsequently died. His name was Arthur Lessman, and I call him up, introduce myself. He's like, "I know who you are." And I ask him, and he confirms all the facts of the story. It was not a pack of wolves. It was just a dog. He tells me, though, that he was this young guy in 1965, had started a business, was busy, was struggling to support his family. And hearing all this, I said, why? Why would a white guy in the 1960s go way out of his way to support black families trying to move into his community? He was struggling, and this was a time of fears of white flight. and property values going down. I couldn't understand. I had to ask him why he would do it. And this is the theme I want to end with. His answer to me blew me away. He said, well, I was sitting at home one night watching TV. I remember the moment I made the decision. And I said, okay, what were you doing? He goes, well, I was sitting at home watching TV. And I know the movie he was watching because I looked it up. It was called Judgment at Nuremberg. Most of America was watching that show because we only had 3 channels back then, y'all. And they would go out at like 11 o'clock. It'd be over. That's why we had higher birth rates back then. Nothing to do at night. I get nervous when I make those jokes. Aunt Alma's going to call my mom. And then guess what? They had breaking news. He said he watched as they broke away from a movie to show a bridge in Alabama. The news was breaking. There were these marchers on a bridge called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They were trying to march from Selma to Montgomery. They got stopped on that bridge by Alabama state troopers that would not let them pass. These men and women were going to kneel and pray, but I know they were going to kneel and pray because they never got a chance to, because John Lewis, always my hero, now my colleague, told me that that's what they were going to do. But before they could kneel and pray to turn around, they got gassed by the state troopers. Tear gas shot at them, and then these state troopers stormed into the fleeing marchers and started viciously beating them over the head. John Lewis said to me very humbly, I shed a little bit of blood on that bridge, Cory. And I said, Congressman, you had your head cracked open. You bled profusely on that bridge. You had to be carried to safety. And so what does a guy in New Jersey do? Watching this on TV, does he say, oh, that's a shame, and just go on with his life? Do he say, I'm too busy to deal with this, I got problems of my own? No, he didn't just sit there. He gets up off that couch and says, this is my country. That when I say those words, I mean those words. Justice for all. He stood up for this ideal of patriotism. What is patriotism? It's love of country. And you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And what is love? Don't tell me it's a weak word or a saccharine word. Love says, I will not let this become a nation of tolerance, where that's our highest ideal. We're a tolerant country. Go home tonight and tell somebody you live with that you tolerate them, and see if that's a great compliment. We are called to be a nation of love. What does love say? Love says that if your kids don't have a great public school, my kids are the lesser for it. My kids are bereft of their genius, of their artistry, of their entrepreneurship. It says that if your family doesn't have access to health care, my family is the lesser for it. Love says that we are all in this together, that we need each other, that we share a common destiny. And so he gets up off of that couch in the name of love, in the name of patriotism. He says, I can't do everything, but I'm not going to allow my inability to do everything to undermine my determination to do something in the cause of justice. And so he says, I can spare just 1 hour a week, just 1 hour. And he calls up to see who might need a little bit of pro bono work from a young lawyer. And he finds this woman named Lee Porter, who's like, hallelujah, I need the help. And they go start working. That was 1965. By 66, 67, he's organized other lawyers to help. By 68, 69, they're really doing it well. And then he says, in 1969, I get this case file, I'll never forget the day, about this young couple coming up from the South that is really struggling, that needs help. He remembers the 2 names on that case file, Carrie and Carolyn Booker, my parents. I would not be standing here right now. I would not be the 4th ever popularly elected African American to the United States Senate. I would not be running for president of the United States of America if it wasn't for the power of our connections one to another. A bunch of marchers on a bridge in Alabama standing up in the name of love instantaneously. They weren't successful that day, but they showed that faith. They showed that love of country. And it changed the heart of one man 1,000 miles away in New Jersey, who then went on and changed the destiny of a generation not yet born. And so here we are in America. People are worried. People are angry. People are afraid. But I learned from women in the projects in Newark that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. That they may beat marchers in Alabama, but that won't be the last word. It'll be my volunteerism. They may have Bull Connor with dogs and hoses denying people equal rights in Birmingham, but that won't be the last word. They may do a Muslim ban in this country, but I'm going out to that airport and I'm going to stand with my fellow Americans. There may be a president that gets inaugurated speaking to American carnage, but I'm coming out the next day in a women's march from coast to coast because I'm having the last word. And so here we are at a crossroads. We're going to talk specifics about this election, but I want you to know where we are. We are at a moral crossroad in America again. And some people want us to get right in the gutter and fight on Donald Trump's terms. He wants us on it's a recipe of losing our morals. I think it's a recipe to lose an election. They didn't fight Bull Connor on his terms. They didn't bring bigger dogs and more powerful hoses. They fought with love and changed the moral imagination of a nation. I say in this election, we can't let it be about one guy and one office. We can't be about what we're against. It's got to be about what we're for. And that we as Democrats, if we want to solve and cure the tribalism and the partisanship, this election can't even just be about us going around saying we're going to beat Republicans. No, it's got to be about us going around and saying we're going to unite Americans, unite them for justice. Iowa, you have a choice. Des Moines, you have a choice. There are some people in this election that want to fight fire with fire. Well, I was a mayor. I ran a fire department. That's not a good strategy for putting out fires. I want you to join me in this campaign if you believe, like I do, that it's time for a revival of grace. It's time for a more compassion and empathy. It's time for a time of hate that we stand up and defend love. That we call this country to a level of patriotism, a level of hope that is response to despair. That we say America as a nation, no matter how hard our challenges, our history is a perpetual testimony to the accomplishment of the impossible. People under tougher circumstances, more difficult challenges, people under more hate and more bigotry and more division, they healed this nation. They bound our wounds and they moved us forward. Now it is our turn. I hope you will join me in this campaign. Stand with me. Sign a commitment to Caucus cards, and let's bring this country to higher ground, because I believe, America, we will rise. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now, maybe my Aunt Alma won't call my mom after that. Guys, we have some time left. This is my plan. I want to answer as many questions as I can. Then I want to take as many selfies as I can. I don't want to run out of here. I want to answer a lot of questions, and then stick around. If you have a personal question for me, I want to do that. If you all have something you want to tell me, I want to stick around for a little while. And I saw my leader. She came over. I'm looking at my leader. Do you want me just to call on people who are standing up?
Yeah, we only have one mic.
We only have one mic. So I'm going to repeat questions.
I can yell.
Okay, sir, please yell. And I'm a little jealous because you have that great lush head of hair there, sir. And you are a veteran. It's good to see you, sir.
In 1965, my brother and sister took the Des Moines School Board to the Supreme Court. They wore black armbands to school.
Wow.
In February, the 50th anniversary of the decision coming down in Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District, and there were parties at all the schools. You'll be happy to know the school board has largely forgiven them. But 6 or 8 girls came up from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, to celebrate the decision in Tinker, and I got a chance to meet them. How do we pull the teeth of the NRA, and how do we teach these bastards that the Second Amendment has 2 clauses? They never talk about a well-regulated militia.
So, sir, I want to be very direct to this question, because it's really important that we fight this battle the right way, and we fight it and win it. And so the first thing I want to say is I want to separate the NRA funded by the gun lobby from the majority of their membership. They're not bad people. In fact, when they poll gun owners and NRA members, I'm saying this with love, man. When they poll NRA members, the majority of them, 84% of NRA members say that they support universal background checks. 84% of NRA members think we should close the terrorist loophole that allows somebody on a terrorist no-fly list to go out and buy weapons and do all kind of carnage. 84% of NRA members say they support a nation where if you have a criminal conviction for doing everything from spousal abuse to using violence, that you shouldn't be able to go out and buy a gun. And so right now, the NRA isn't even doing what the majority of their membership wants. And so the way I'm going to take this fight, and I'm not going to go through all my tactics. I don't want to let them see what's coming completely. But there are ways we can fight and organize to win this fight. And especially because you see a lot of the stories about these guys now. They're taking foreign money, dark money into their organization and using it to engage in politics and campaigning in a way that I think puts their 501c3 status in jeopardy. We need to use our power as people and the federal government to hold accountable people for breaking laws, whether it's campaign finance 501c3 laws, and breaking the trust they have with their own membership. I am telling you right now, I have been in neighborhoods with shrines to children on corners with candles and teddy bears where people have been shot. I have been on the scene as a young man was bleeding out, trying to desperately hold his body together in time for the ambulance to come. I've been in countless funeral after countless funeral where the unholy thing is being done of parents burying their children. This is a fight that we are going to take in ways that haven't been done before, and that we are going to win it. And you are going to be, with the passion that you have as a veteran of the movements of past, you're going to help me win this too. Thank you, sir. We're going to go Tony, and then in the back, that is a fantastic hat. So you're after Tony, okay?
I was going to ask you a question, which you answered.
Okay.
My question was, how would you unify the Democratic Party? Because it seems like we stretched out so far.
Yes, sir.
No unity.
Yes, sir. Could I take another crack at answering that, though? Sure. Okay. Because right now we should have a competition of ideas. Heck, this 2020 election, they call it the 2020 election because that's how many people are running, 2020. And there is a menu of options. It looks like the Cheesecake Factory. Do you guys have that, you know? Yes, it's like one of those menus. I get tired just reading the Cheesecake Factory. I'm like, man, I should bring this to my bedside. I could read this before I go to sleep because it'll put me asleep. You all are going to have your decisions of people with distinct resumes and approaches to this fight. You've heard my resume. I'm the only person in this race that was a CEO, was a chief executive of a major American city, turned it around, and also was a United States senator that has legislative federal experience of getting things done. And then you all have heard my message distinction, which I am sorry. I've had many tough fights. If you don't think I've had tough fights, go on Netflix tonight, this is your homework, and watch an Oscar-nominated documentary called Street Fight about my first major fight. Now listen, I have to confess, it was Oscar-nominated, and it lost in the Oscars to a movie called March of the Dagnab Penguins. Penguins are not cute. Not anymore, in my opinion. You're saying, yes, they are. She's like, yes, they are. But please watch that movie. We make a mistake to think that you have to be strong, you have to be mean. To be tough, you have to be cruel. You could be a tough fighter. Wasn't Gandhi a tough fighter? Oh, yeah. Wasn't King a tough fighter? I'm telling you, there are ways to fight and win, and I hope you'll watch that movie to see my pathway to beat the most powerful machine in the country and how I fight. But Tony, there's going to be people that want to fight with different tactics than me, and you all should decide which way you want to go. And so I'm hoping that some people here will sign caucus cards because they believe that this is a time that we need to call to the higher angels of our country and not to emulate that which we're trying to replace. But the last thing I want to say is to put the onus on you, Tony, and the rest of this room. Every candidate you have a chance to shake hands with, all 2,020 of us, you should ask them or demand from them the same thing. Hey, I heard your message. God bless you if you become the nominee. But if you're not the nominee, I want to extract from you a promise that whoever gets the nomination, I'm making you this promise right now, all the other candidates should commit themselves to falling in line and supporting that person. And you know what? I started my day usually on my knees, as I did today in Sioux City, and I pray that God that allows me the privilege of leading this nation. But if I'm not the person, I am going to do everything I can, not just for me to support that person, but to tell my supporters to cut it out and support as well. So I want to make sure, Tony, that Des Moines, you are going to see every candidate there is, the ones with hair and the ones without. And I want to make sure that we get everybody to make that same commitment I just made to you. My friend with a great hat.
Okay, I'm shopping. I don't know who I'm supporting. You have truly impressed me.
Thank you. What's your first name? Cheryl Cooley, please.
At any rate, this administration has committed many sins. And deconstructing our government by administration. And among the many sins they have done is deconstructing the EPA, the regulations that protect us. We're having our air poisoned, we're having our water poisoned, we're having our land poisoned, and this is nonpartisan. We all need to breathe the air, we all need to drink the water, and we all need to have good food coming from good soil. Not just the president, it is the people in Congress and the Senate and big business who are complicit in accepting money to poison our land, our air, and our water. How can we turn this around?
God bless you. God bless you. Alma, you're going to have to talk to her because I want her on my team. So can you try to convince her to caucus for me? Thank you for that, because this is an issue that means so much to me personally. Again, I live in a neighborhood that has surrounded by environmental injustice. Wow. My kids drink out of bottled waters in my school because there's lead in the water. How can we have, Reuters says we have 3,000 jurisdictions in America where the children have twice the blood lead levels in Flint, Michigan. That means we have millions of our kids that live in communities where it's more easy to find unleaded gasoline than unleaded water. And that's an injustice. I live in a community that has Superfund sites. Iowa has Superfund sites. I've traveled all around the country to environmental injustice sites and introduced a major bill, the only of its kind in the Senate, about environmental justice, giving local communities standing to sue, to change the things that they're experiencing, and doing a lot more to compel environmental justice. But I want to go a little further, because this is a controversial issue. I'm not only going to come out to Iowa and tell you what you want to hear. We do have a problem, and there are things I'm going to reverse as soon as I am president of the United States. The methane, the mercury rules that were rolled back, the clean air, clean power plan that was reversed. I'm going to reverse that back. There's a lot of things I can do, but there's something problem that here in Iowa. I was just in a community in Nevada talking about this. These massive corporate CAFOs that are being put into communities that are poisoning water, poisoning wells, poisoning creeks. This is a type of farming that is an affront to the heritage of Iowa, and it's doing farming in a way that's driving out independent family farmers. And so environmental justice, we see it in every way, from air quality in places like Cancer Alley, where you have these cancer clusters where chemical companies put this stuff in the air. We now have cities that have worse air days than Beijing. Denver last year had 50 air quality days that were worse than Beijing because our air quality is getting worse in America. And asthma rates, don't get me started, is the #1 reason why our kids miss school. So this is something that I've dealt with as a mayor. It's something I'm dealing with as a senator through the legislation. But please, Lord, give me the power to be your president. And I'm going to take this fight to make sure that we pursue environmental justice, that we make sure we hold polluters accountable, that we put regulations on that ensure safe water, safe air, and safe soil, and that we create the incentives that we should have to do the right thing. Oil companies, coal companies have all kinds of incentives, tax breaks, and more. We need to make sure that we're creating incentives for people to do the right thing, and that's everything from farmers, incentivizing them to do things like cover crops and more that pull nitrogen and pull carbon out of the air. We need to make sure we're incentivizing investments in green technology and the kind of things that give us a clean energy future. We need to do what other countries are doing in incentivizing driving vehicles that are electric vehicles and providing incentives for us as consumers so that we're more incentivized to buy those kind of vehicles so we see the quicker electrification of our automobiles and cars and trucks. We have so much power, and we need a president that's willing to use that to clean up our water, to clean up our air, and clean up our soil, and I will be that president. All right? I'm going to go here and here. I'm not the biggest Chicago Bulls fan, but I'll go there next. All right, go ahead.
First of all, can you hear me?
I hear you fine. And I wish I had some of that more bass in my voice like you got. You got Barry White bass in your voice, man.
Welcome back, Senator. Thank you so much for taking time. And my name is Tony as well. Tony's in the house.
My middle name is Anthony. Do I count? Yes. Okay. All right.
And you're an Iowan at heart and in your
All right. I feel like this Tony Club is good.
Yeah.
Tony. We can be a singing group. That's some old school for y'all.
But that was my question.
Okay.
Old school.
Yes.
Because I was aging. And we are an aging community. I'm sorry about that. I mean, we are getting older. And we need the comfort and the security of knowing that we have a president in the White House that cares about making sure that what we've worked for all of our lives to pay for, to have that security there when we retire, that our pensions are going to be secure and solvent. And if you were lucky enough to have a union job, sir, what would a Booker administration do to make sure that those types of pension plans remain solvent?
Thank you, sir. So I'm going to answer these questions quickly because I want to get to the two guys with Chicago Bulls paraphernalia on. I want to try to get them over with quickly. So real quick, there are pension plans at risk. I join with one of my colleagues, Sherrod Brown, to saying that we should do what's necessary to stabilize those pension plans from the federal government. If corporations can get bailouts, these insolvent pension plans need some support from the federal government, and you know what I'm talking about, and I will support that. Number two, a whole lot of people in here are concerned about Social Security actually being secure. And I'm going to tell you a quick fix I have to that is kind of common sense. Why is it that when I'm working, or people here that work and make $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year, you pay a higher percentage of your income to Social Security tax than somebody that makes $5 million a year because of that Social Security cap. So we are going to raise the cap and we just raise the cap for higher network earners. It won't affect like 90% of Americans, and we will bring more money in to make our Social Security system solvent. That's how I'm going to do that, number two. And then number three, security also comes from making Medicare work better for our seniors. Because as much as I've been saying Medicare for all, there's a whole lot of people in this room that might come up to me later and say, hey, Cory, I like Medicare, but I still am paying too much for some of my contributions. We have to make sure that Medicare is stronger so that people aren't going in their pocket and putting themselves in many ways in financial jeopardy. So I will create more security in retirement through stabilizing pension plans, through stabilizing Social Security, and making sure that Medicare covers more of the full cost of a senior's health coverage, okay? So, okay, let's get to our Chicago Bulls. I'm in Des Moines, but I know there's some Chicago fans. Real quick, go ahead, Merle.
How you doing, sir?
I'm well, Merle.
My name is Merle. I'm an ACLU Rights for All volunteer.
Thank you.
Also, I'm a DJ host at Ames, Iowa, KHOY 89.1 FM.
All right. Do you play some Do you play some Tony from time?
I play current hip hop.
Oh, you play current hip hop. Chance the Rapper?
No old school, that's down here.
So you play Chance?
Chance, I play Chance.
Okay, good.
We got a question. I know you spoke on criminal justice reform a little bit.
Yes, sir.
But I wanted to know, since our country locks up people at a higher rate than any other country in the world.
Yes, sir.
And I want to know if you're willing to commit to cutting that in half if elected in your first term.
So Merle is really preaching gospel. There's a group actually that was formed called Cut 50, which is cut our incarceration rates in half. Even if we cut our incarceration rates in half, we would still have higher incarceration rates than most nations. And so my commitment is to cut 50s, to cut that in half. And let me just not tell you, it's nice to say ambitious goals. I want to tell you how we're going to do that. Number one is we need to stop the recidivism rates that we have in this country that are so high. You want to know the best way to stop our recidivism? A job is the best way to do that. So we're going to lower recidivism, which is one of the biggest sources of our criminal justice system, by having treatment, mental health care, and employment opportunities for people who have been involved in the criminal justice system. And then number two is we're going to lower and eliminate many mandatory minimums. We've incentivized states to create those. They take all power away from judges and prosecutors who have the ability to make those decisions. There are so many accounts of judges saying to themselves, I have nothing to do. This is the mandatory minimum, but you really don't deserve that. And let's go further to that. One of the best ways to cut the prison population is actually stop people from going to prison in the first place. And so there are pipelines we have to stop. I've already mentioned one for mental health and addiction, but we also have to cut the school to prison pipeline. And the Obama administration, you all got to know I miss Obama, and hold on, and I miss her husband too. But Michelle's husband was doing some really good things to deal with the school-to-prison pipeline. There are things we can do to stop people going. One of the best ways to attack people going to incarceration is to attack poverty. And so that's why things like my RISE credit, things like my baby bonds, are things that lift people out of poverty and will ultimately lower incarceration rates. Second Chicago Bull, man. You just like the lid. Okay, it's just all about fashion. That's a fashion statement, not a now what about you, sir? Tell the truth. Is that fashion?
No, mine's on sale.
I feel like I'm at home in Newark. People keeping it real with me tonight. I like it.
I'd like to first say to Miss Jamie Woods, if CNN is in this house, you need to take a lesson from her. This is what you call a real town hall meeting. That CNN be doing is all fake. They already got people out in the audience already picked who they want to ask the question. They ain't going down like that here. And so CNN need to take a lesson of this. All that signing in and all that old mess that y'all got to do, and you got to have a ticket and all, show your new phone that hey, I'm here and able to come in and all that old mess.
You can roll into work with me anytime. Go ahead, what's your question?
With this so-called person we have as a president, the racism, especially us as people of color, put up on a daily basis, we have something that we have to deal with. It's just not here, it's throughout the country, called racial profiling. And it runs rapid. They had something here at Iowa House for the Senate to try to do something, but it failed. So we still have to deal with racial profiling, even though we have a police chief here in Des Moines. It doesn't go on, but it clearly goes on, and it happens on a daily basis. And then the so-called president we have in office, the lying. It's like that's the new form now, is lying. With the Mueller report, if Barack was just to do a third, not even a third, just a little bit. Just like we used to say back in the day, little dabba do you? Just a little bit. He would be impeached, and these folks would be turning over and having a fit. But all of a sudden, since this one is in, it's all right.
So let me address that. Let me address that. First of all, we know that when Barack Obama wore a tan suit, you turn on Fox News and it was like, you know, oh my God, the revolution. And so I agree with that the standards are being applied very differently to who's president of the United States. But I am much more concerned about some of these issues that were going on before Donald Trump of the racism within our society and how it was affecting real people in our country. Well, look, we talk about our criminal justice system, and let's just be clear. There's no difference between blacks and whites for using marijuana or even selling marijuana. But African Americans are almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for it. There seems to be laws that are applied differently to different people, which violates the fundamental American principle that's written on the Supreme Court, equal justice under the law. And when we have a criminal justice system where we see African Americans more likely to be stopped, African Americans more likely to be searched, African Americans more likely to be arrested, African Americans for the same conviction, when you control for everything but race, you show that if you're African American for the same charge, you're going to get a longer sentence. You're more likely to get the mandatory minimum. I don't want to leave out Latinos because it's bad. There's disparate treatment for Latinos as well. I don't want to leave out Native Americans. Okay, so we see a system that has baked in bigotry. And we also see systems that the legacies of bigotry also have an impact. You know, a lot of the things that were pathways to the middle class, the GI Bill or Social Security, were written in a way to exclude African Americans. Systems of redlining, mortgage loans, these are all things that have been baked into the system right now where we have real disparities in our country. We have disparities in health outcomes. We lead the country overall, lead the planet overall, industrial nations to be exact, in maternal mortality. Women dying in childbirth, but black women die in childbirth 3-4 times more than white women. Asthma, I said before, is the #1 reason why kids miss school in America, but black kids are almost 10 times more likely to die of asthma complications than white kids. These are disparities that we have to talk directly to that were going on before this person was even elected president. Let me go even further than that. Access to capital to start businesses. If you're a woman who's trying to get a loan, if you're a minority trying to get a loan, your rates are far lower. That you see the number of blacks and women and Latinos, minorities and women getting opportunities in the workplace. We don't have equality at the workplace. And so what I'm saying is these are issues we have to talk about. It shouldn't be a time where people get into a defensive crouch. It should be a time that all of us say, hey, wait a minute, if you're a family that's not getting equal housing rights, I'm going to step up for you. I always say in a society where we see sexism, and we do see it in this society, it's not enough to say be a brother that just says, hey, I'm not a sexist. If sexism is going on, you need to be anti-sexist. Because if you're doing nothing about a problem, the opposite of justice, it's not injustice, it's apathy, it's indifference and inaction. It's if racism exists in a society, it's not enough to say, hey, I'm not a racist. You have to say, I'm an anti-racist, I'm going to do things to combat and confront the problems in society. And so, I revere this flag because of the principles upon which it stands. The gentleman who's a veteran and other people in this room who's fought and struggled for a greater inclusive society, my message is simply we still have work to do. We got to talk about the truth of the challenges we're facing, and we have to confront them. And the worst thing we could have is a president that can't even condemn white supremacy. Now, let me just say to you, if you are worried about terrorism in this country, let me just deal with data. When I was mayor of the city, I used to say, in God we trust, but everybody else bring me data. Show me the numbers. So if you are an American that's worried about terrorist attacks, since 9/11, the majority of our terrorist attacks have been right-wing extremist groups. The majority of those have been white supremacist groups. So you see synagogues and black churches and gay nightclubs being the targets of this kind of bigotry and hatred, and we have a president now whose language is being used by white supremacists as an example of license to do the kind of hatred that they perpetrate. And so my point is we have to be a society that says we stand for justice for all, equality under the law, equal opportunity, and we have to be invested in the idea that this doesn't mean that one group is getting over on another group. No. Equality of opportunity means that we as a whole society will do better because we are the most heterogeneous country on the planet Earth. And we are making the statement to the world that when all of God's children come together, we're going to show you that our diversity is our strength and that we are going to lead humanity to a better tomorrow. Okay? Yes. You don't have to stand up. You do not have to stand up. Okay. What's your name, though?
My name is Matthew Little Smith. And I'm asking about mental health parity.
Yes.
Now, I'm retired, but I do a lot of work in mental health care for National Alliance on Mental Illness. However, my home state is Minnesota, and Wellstone did a lot as far as mental health. I don't have a big mouth. Oh, I do have a big mouth, but it's not loud. Anyway, he introduced and did a lot for mental health parity. However, all that time, they'll say mental health parity is there, but they're not putting any money there. So I would like to know what you're doing, what you can do to change that, because the last piece is the folks that are getting hurt the most are people of color and poor people.
So I use the word shame a lot because I think that we have to confront the shame in a nation. And there's lots of shame. There's a shame that we sing a song in our national anthem, the home of the brave. And then it's a shame that when our brave men and women come home, there's a high homelessness rate. I mean, that's a shame. And that's why I talk a lot about ending veterans' homelessness. But the stigma and the shame that we put on people who are struggling with a health issue that happens to be a mental health issue is no different than people who are struggling with physical health issues. And we need to have a healthcare system that fully recognizes that, and instead of stigmatizing, incarcerating, isolating people with mental illness, we need to start dealing with it up front as a society, because there's not a family in here that is not dealing with mental health issues somewhere in their families. And that's why I respect the courage of a lot of public figures who are coming out and talking about their mental health challenges. And so my commitment to you as a United States Senator, regardless of what I get elected to, and then most certainly as your president, is that I'm going to work to end the shame and the shadows and bring this back to the center of our healthcare policy, especially for what we have right now is a disparity in people with money and people without money in terms of the kind of healthcare access they're getting. And I believe if we can create a parity in healthcare, period, for mental health and then other physical health disabilities or challenges, we create that parity and we expand access, we'll be able to deal with this issue someplace other than prisons. Okay? Thank you. I told the gentleman here that I'm going to go to my right because I want you all to know as a Democrat I can go to my right. Okay? All right, yes.
God bless you for coming here to be with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Your name for the crowd.
D'Artagnan is my name.
D'Artagnan.
And my grandmother was born in Buxton in 1896.
Whoa. Was your grandmother born in Buxton?
My grandmother,
Born in Buxton in
1896.
1896. We could be family, man. I don't know.
My question, I work extensively with public school students here in Des Moines, and I had a great public school here, education is the class of 67.
All right.
My son teaches public school at PS 21 in Patterson.
My neighborhood, yes.
Amen. So my question, what are we going to do to stop the bleeding, stop the taking of funds from the public sector that has been given to private schools, both in your state and in this state?
So what I see going on in your state to me is unconscionable. I see rural schools closing because they're being bled off with a lot of schemes that ultimately don't serve all students. A lot of the schemes I see going on in your state are creating environments where they are bleeding out public schools and then blaming them for not working. You can't do that. We have to be a country that fully supports public education, which to be a vibrant democracy, that's the #1 thing. And so this is how I can help as a president of the United States in this country, in this state right here. #1, to fully fund special needs education in your state, which means right now, the federal government's not meeting its full obligation. They're only paying about 18% nationally. If they paid 40%, a lot of schools who are struggling with our beautiful children, making sure that they have full educational opportunities, it's taking up a lot of their resources and pulling it away from other things. If we gave them the resources they need, it would not only help special needs kids, but it would help all the children in the school. #2, I want to help and have a plan. If Bill Clinton could stand up, and I respect the point in history, and talk about a COPS plan, that we're going to put, I think it was, I can't remember how many thousands of more police officers, it might have been a million more police officers on the streets. It's time that we've learned from that dark history when locking up kids, and we have a president stand up and say, I'm going to put fully funded teachers in every school. And so this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sure that we are a nation that fully funds the actual people who are in our schools. I don't want to just say teachers. Teachers are important. And this is how we're going to do it. Teachers and school professionals. That includes mental health professionals. That includes counselors, speech pathologists. Kids need a whole group of professionals in those schools that are going to help them. And this is what I'm going to do for those professionals. First and foremost, your student debt, we're going to relieve it. You should not be carrying student debt if you're willing to teach. #2, we're going to give you the tax treatment now that we reserve for people in hedge funds. Think about this. If you work in a hedge fund, you get this carried interest. You pay a smaller percentage of your salary, of your earnings and salary, smaller percentage of your salary in taxes than teachers do, who reach in their pockets every single day to pay for things for their kids, and they can't write all of that off. So I believe we should use our tax code to give further benefits to teachers, especially those teachers that are teaching in areas like rural areas or inner city areas. They should especially get incentives to teach in often the hardest and most underfunded areas. If we do that with teachers and school professionals, relieving them of debt, giving them incentives to get into the profession, we will elevate that profession and support our schools from the federal level. But I haven't stopped yet. One more thing I want to say and really get this off. One of the other reasons I fought so hard against Betsy DeVos to be our Secretary of Education is because I knew her before she was Secretary of Education, and I knew we had very different views on some of our most vulnerable children. And that includes gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender kids. We need to have an honest conversation in our country that there's still tremendous bullying that goes on. About 30% of our LGBTQ kids report not going to school at some point because of fear. And we have in the Department of Justice, a division of civil rights that under the Obama administration was protecting kids, was standing up for LGBTQ, transgender kids, standing up for African American kids, working on making sure that disciplinary policies were equal in schools. Because we see studies that show for the same infraction, African Americans are more likely to be expelled out of school placements. So my Department of Education, I'm your president, will not only deal with getting more funding and especially supporting the professionals that work in schools, starting with teachers, but it's also going to make sure that we focus on equity for special needs kids and funding, and equity in terms of LGBTQ and minority children in schools as well. Okay? Yes.
My name is Foxy One Feather. What is your stance on fossil fuel and the destruction of our land?
And when you say the destruction of our land, because I know there's a lot of things going on in Native American reservations. I was out at Standing Rock, for example, with folks who had some real issues about pipelines and other things like that. Can you be more specific on your question?
Fracking also, eminent domain, not even honoring any of the ancestral lands that they have burial grounds that they've gone through.
So I'm sorry, to hear her question, she's saying, what are you going to do regards fossil fuels and a lot of the things that are being done in the pursuit of fossil fuels, which are takings, it's a legal term, but taking from lands, eminent domain, disturbing ancestral burial grounds, undermining the treaties we have in our country that are not being fully honored. And so this is an issue I have to say I've learned a lot about since I was a senator, because we don't have the kind of populations that you're talking about where there are tribal lands. But since I've learned the issues and met with a lot of tribal leaders, I've been stunned that this country that already has a shameful history with Native Americans is continuing to do things to undermine tribal sovereignty in this country. And now these independent nations in our country, they should be respected, and tribal sovereignty should be the governing value in everything that we do. And so to allow people to run pipelines through your land, for the government to take your property back like we see happening is unacceptable, and I will not be that kind of president. I'll be a president that respects your tribal authority, respects your tribal sovereignty, and makes sure that we work in peace and concert with you all when it comes to respecting your ancestral lands. But you asked me a bigger question than that. You're like, hey, Cory, what about fossil fuels in general? There's a lot of things that are going on. And as a guy who fought with, in a bipartisan way, when they try to do drilling off of the coast of the Atlantic coast of our country, we've so far been able to stop it. The Trump administration is pushing to be the first administration to drill off the coast of the Atlantic. And so when us on the East Coast, when we see, well, they drilled in the Gulf and they spilled. They drilled by Alaska and they spilled. They drilled off the coast of California and they spilled, costing billions and billions of dollars of damage. We in New Jersey and Virginia and Delaware don't want drilling there. But I can't be a NIMBY. I can't be just saying, not off my, I guess not backyard, it's off my coast. What is that, a NIMCO? Or we need to transition off of fossil fuels. It may not be as fast as some activists want, but we've got to start creating the kind of incentives that move us as rapidly as possible to move off of fossil fuels. And those of us who say, look, we have created an independence off of foreign oil because of fracking. This is an industry that employs a lot of people. And we Democrats have to be very responsible, because we had a backlash to coal miners who are saying, you're threatening my livelihood. I've been doing this for generations. And unless you talk to me about my concerns about feeding my family, then we're doing it in a way that's going to divide this country. And so this is what I want to say very pointedly. I'm going to do the things to make sure that we meet our climate goals here in the United States. I'm going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accords to make sure we lead this country. But to my brothers and sisters that are working in these industries, we've got to make sure that we're doing this transition in a way that respects them and their heritage as well. That shows that, hey, if you lose a job because a coal plant closes, that you're not working at a Walmart at prices that are not going to be able to support your family. This is why we need to become a country that does what other nations are doing. Maybe a great example is Switzerland, with apprenticeship programs that work not just for young people coming up, but work for people that are moving mid-career. So that if you lose your job, that's a good union job with pensions and benefits, that you can move right into a training program at 50, say, and get trained and learn and earn a living wage while you're learning a new skill, and to be able to get into a new career. If we create an America where there's Americans that sit back and say, what you're talking about, presidential candidate, is a win for them and a lose for me, we can go forward in a way where we can respect tribal sovereignty, we can transition off of fossil fuel, and we could provide a safe runway for people that are in these industries over the decades as we transition out, that there's a pathway for them and their families to have security, economic security as well. And that's my vision. All right, I'm gonna go over here. I'm moving to my right. I got a family member with her hand up, so I got to call on her too. What is your pin says 51?
51 now, yes. I'm founder of Iowans for DC Statehood. My name is Tamara.
I love that. I didn't know there was an, I'm blown away. I met with the mayor of DC last week. There's a group at Iowans for DC Statehood?
Yes, there is now.
I'm going to record a video for her, to the mayor, to show her. I don't think she knows that.
Oh, but no, she should by now, yeah.
Okay, maybe she does. I'm sorry.
But no, tell her. Let her know we're doing something.
Okay, definitely. That is really wonderful. As a guy that was born in Washington, D.C., I fully support D.C. statehood.
Well, and thank you for that. And I knew you had come out and supported it, and I just wanted to know, first of all, that you'll fight for the justice of the people of D.C., 713,000 Americans plus.
Bigger than 2 states.
Yeah, 48% of which is African American. And I don't understand, why is this not a bigger deal? Why is this not a more important issue when we're talking about the equal rights of 713,000 Americans that are disenfranchised from the system and not sharing the same rights as every other American?
I'm just literally blown away by this question, because you are truly someone who, even though you're many, many miles away from there, you care about the equal rights for all Americans. It's really a powerful empathy that you have for the plight of folks that are fighting for what we all take for granted, that we have a voice in our legislature, that our votes count for something. I mean, think about it being an American, that the federal government is actually the authority over where you live. They're fighting that local city wants to do things on gun safety. They want to do things on marijuana. And the federal government keeps telling them they can't do it, and they don't have a vote or a say. I think I remember that there was a revolution about that. It's called taxation without representation. You kind of remember some country had a revolution over those issues. So I, as a guy who was born in D.C., has family in D.C., this is an issue I take very, very personally. And again, what's holding us back, unfortunately, is the majority has the rights over the minority in this case. We've got to convince a legislature to pass D.C. statehood, and it's going to be hard to do.
Make it not about party. It's got to be about people. It's got to be about people being Americans.
And I believe that, but you have to understand, you've always got to take a step of empathy and understand what other people might think. And the Republicans in the Senate would think to myself, wait a minute, I want to give 2 more Democratic senators to this city? And so how do you do it? It is. I'm just saying to you, understand when you're on a negotiating table, I did this when I was a mayor negotiating, I put myself in the position of the person I'm trying to negotiate or work with to understand where they're coming. So we've got to figure out that will always be the log jam that will come down to it. We've got to figure out a strategy to get through that. It's something I was talking directly with the mayor at a new wonderful restaurant in Anacostia. And I'm going to try to figure out a strategy to get those folks taxation with representation in the legislature. Okay? Yes. And then it's got to go to my family member. Of course. You know I'm a smart man. All right. Akayo's got my back. Introduce yourself to the crowd.
Yes, I'm Martha Frazier, so I'm known by my nickname, Baghdad, and I'm living right now.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
I have some allergies.
I can't get over that. I can't get over that. So speak. I will translate. Okay. I will be your anchor translator.
First, I want to say thank you to the lady in the classy hat, Cheryl, because she brought out some of the things that I wanted to say. Okay. My allergies are bothering me. All right, thank you. But I don't want to be selfish, Cory, but it says Iowa for Cory. So I want to know what you're going to do about the water situation. I have to ponder on that because I'm up at 3:30 in the morning listening to the late night and the early morning news, and it is a priority now. In case you didn't know it, Channel 11 had a documentary on, and there are states that are borrowing water, clean water, from other states in America. Yeah, that's how bad in all four corners, east, northeast, south, and east and west. And then they had a lady on that told about how we've already dipped into the reservoirs or the water that we have reserved, clean water, for like 10 years to come from now. So we're running out of water. So what do you propose to do?
Yes, thanks. Sorry, sir.
Our rivers are contaminated. Yeah. Has anybody looked at the Des Moines River like that?
And they're contaminated with phosphates. I can go through a lot of the things that are in those waters. Right. And so we need to have a clean water agenda for our country that's going to deal with, in New Hampshire, they care about PFASs, these chemicals that are in water. In rural South Carolina, they're concerned about a lot of the runoff contaminants there. In places like Flint, they're worried about lead in the water. And here you have water, not just water quality issues, but water security issues for the future. And our country's going to have a lot of water security issues in the future. And so the 2 things I want to say in response to this is, number 1, we are going to have a rural water infrastructure plan that's going to deal with water systems in states like this. But then number 2, this gets me back to making sure we are aggressively holding accountable those polluters who are polluting the water. There's a fancy economic term called negative externalities. And what that means is that if you're running a business, you externalize your costs onto society and you internalize your profits. It's almost like you say, I'm going to be a capitalist for my profits and a socialist for my costs, and push the cost of my business out on people. Now, I live by the Passaic River, and it has Agent Orange in the Passaic River because there was a company that refused to buy the kind of filtration system, which probably cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars back in the 60s and 70s, and instead they just dumped into the Passaic River and poisoned our river. It's now a Superfund site. And so you're seeing this now in our country where many people are not paying the full cost of the production of their product, which is anti-capitalism. And we've got to change that. And so I'm going to make sure that we, number one, have infrastructure investments to secure clean water, and number two, we hold polluters accountable. Now, before Akeo steps up here and trumps me because I'm just a senator not representing the state, he is the true representative of the people here who was elected by the people. I want to say one thing if I can, Akeo, because this is a tribute to my leaders over here, and it's something I want to just make, a point that I want to make. I've been talking about this all month, that this month is an anniversary. It may be my 50th anniversary of my mom's hard work, but it is actually the 51st anniversary. April 4th was the 51st anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. And the reason why I want to end with that is because I'm going to say something that may sound a little strange, but one of my favorite places in America to visit is the site where Martin Luther King was slain. And you all know it was the Lorraine Motel. And why was Martin Luther King in Memphis? Workers' rights. Workers' rights. Pensions and payments, like you all were mentioning. And the reason why I say it's one of my favorite spots is because if you go there today, you will see a stone. It's a museum now. They kept the front of the hotel as it is. But if you go there today, you'll see a stone right there where Martin Luther King was assassinated. And the stone has words from Scripture written in it. Their words were originally from the Torah, but they're represented in all three Abrahamic faiths, Islam and Christianity. And they're the words of the story of Joseph from Genesis. Now, I'm one of those people that says, before you tell me about your religion, first show it to me and how you treat other people. And as I said all the time on this trip, I would rather hang out with a nice atheist than a mean Christian any day of the week. But as I am. You guys are really making me feel like I'm at home in Newark. So what does it say right there? The words of Joseph's brothers that they proclaimed right before they took Joseph and they threw him into the well. Now they threw him into the well to die. Threw him into the pit. But he didn't die there. There's an old saying in religion that says sometimes you got to go to the pit before you go to the palace. Because he would rise up out of that pit and go on to lead a nation through crisis. Now we're in that pit. If you don't think we're in that pit, we were just talking about that pit, that we live in a country where kids can find unleaded gasoline more easily than unleaded water. We're in that pit because Americans who work full-time jobs still find themselves with more month at the end of their money than money at the end of their month. We're in that pit because people are putting aside life-saving medication because they can't afford it. We're in that pit because they're draining public schools of resources and then trying to close them. We're in that pit on so many levels. But the question is will we rise out of that pit? And so what's the challenge? I love to hear the yes. But what's the challenge then at that spot where Martin Luther King was died? What's written there is the words of Joseph's brothers before they grabbed the guy with the coat of many colors, the dream interpreter, before they threw him into the pit. And this is what it says as a challenge to us and future generations. It says, behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of his dreams. See what becomes of his dream. What is going to become of our dream as Americans? The dreams that our ancestors died for. The dreams that folks on beaches in Iwo Jima or beaches in Normandy died for. The dreams that people died in the civil rights movement for. What will become of our dreams? Will the dream become dull and dim? Will the dream die? What will become of the American dream? And my challenge to everyone in this room is to make a commitment that right now, at this moral crossroads, we won't go the low road into the quicksand of division and hatred, that we'll take the high road of faith and love and decency and grace and kindness. This is the time that we all must commit ourselves that we will also be a generation of dreamers. that we'll dream of a nation where everyone has access to health care, that we'll dream of a nation that every child has a great public school that's a cathedral of learning for their brilliance and their glory, that we dream of a nation that everyone who works a full-time job will have a living wage, that we dream of a nation where every senior citizen can retire with safety and security. Can we have those dreams again in our time? And like past generations, advance this nation closer to those dreams. I promise you, if we make this nation, this election, not just about one guy in one office, but if we make it about the rekindling of that dream, the answer to that challenge, that we determine that what will become of the dream, that we will be a nation that again is a light unto other nations. If we do this, we may feel like we're in a pit right now, but over the next year or so, we will be the nation that shows by the decisions we make and the work we do, we will show that America yet again will rise. Thank you, everyone.
Senator Booker! Senator Booker! Senator Booker! Senator Booker! What? 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 All right, Senator Booker is going to take pictures with you. We just got some housekeeping. Give me a seat just real quick, and we're going to let him get ready. He's going to take some pictures. We don't want to crowd him. We're just going to do a couple of things real quick. Jamie, let's give Jamie a hand. We can get Jamie up here. He's not going to leave, but Senator Booker, he's going to stay. But so we don't want you, but we want to do this. Senator Booker, we know that you also talk about economic development and meeting the needs. And one of the things that we wanted to do at the Black Caucus is thank you for coming, but we wanted to have a raffle. We want to have a raffle, and we're going to give you, the key is we got some gas tickets for gasoline, because you got to get to work. And we got some Hy-Vee tickets, because you got to eat. All right, yeah. So we're gonna ask if Senator Booker is all right if you pull the tickets out. Pull your tickets out. Okay, just bear with us 1 second. Here we go. And it's 136-0050. 136. You got it? There it is. Chair. All right, we got it. Let's get this through. We don't have that many, but we want to get them done. Another ticket.
All right, don't be mad at me if it's not your ticket.
No, not at all. 136-0073. All right, here you go. Come on, get it. So we can keep moving here. Also, we want to identify Senator Booker. We have Mitch Henry from the Asian Latino Coalition with us today. All right, here we go. 136-0120. And we have our SCC member in the back, Carl. Where's Carl at? There he is, back there in the back. Okay, we got 2 more drawings and then we're done. Okay, here we go.
We got a Johnson County Supervisor too, sir.
We got a Johnson County Supervisor. We in this earlier. You know, my boo. Don't tell your husband I said that. All right, Roseanne, she is the, here, understand. Huh? I couldn't think of being dumped by a better man. Roseanne, so y'all know, she is the first African American to be elected in Johnson County. The first African American and first African American female in the state. And she got a job. She being paid, y'all. So she's doing it. Okay, we got 136. 0034. Right here. Okay, last one. This is it. Let's make it a good one. Here we go. All right, here we go. All right. 136 0039. We want to do, we know it's your birthday, but the thing is, usually two things that we normally do when we have a town meeting or we have an event for the Iowa Black Caucus. One, we always say a prayer at the beginning and the end. Secondly, we always ask our elders in the room if we can continue. And we bypass that, but we want to ask your blessing to continue to end this, you know, because you are elder. And we also wanted, because of Cory, is to celebrate your 100th birthday. And it wouldn't be good if we didn't end with happy birthday. There's Tina Hoss, who is our jazz singer, sings down at Noche. She's going to lead us in happy birthday. And then we're going to, while she's doing that, we're going to pass the bucket. If you want to become a member of the Black Caucus, please sign up out front. It's $25. Mitch, I learned that from you. I learned that from you, Mitch. But if you want to just donate, please do. Just pass the bucket. But we're going to have Tina sing happy birthday. Cory, can you get by, please, so we can take some pictures? 100 years old, folk. May we all be blessed. All right? Okay, here we get ready to go. All right.
1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
And we want to say to everybody again, thank you for Jamie Woods, our chair, and Brother Chris, you're right. Jamie has led this Black Caucus so that when we hold our events, it's down home. It's real community. Yeah. Everybody, thank you for coming. If we could just join hands real quick, and then Senator Booker going to take a picture, we want to close in prayer.
See you some other round.
And we want to thank you for doing the birthday cake for Senator Booker. Okay, we can join in just real quick. Join somebody's hand in there. Join somebody's hand just real quick. Okay, we want to join that. It just take a few seconds here. In the name of God and those gracious, most merciful, to God we thank you for this evening. We thank you for blessing those who came here tonight. We ask you to bless those who wanted to come and could not come. To God we would like you to please, we beg you to bless them.
those who have lost loved ones. Bless our first responders. Bless our veterans. Bless our family members that are here. Bless our Queen Mother who has turned 100 years old and whose shoulders we stand on. Dear God, we ask that you bless Senator Booker as he continues on the campaign and as he continues to reach out to people. Dear God, we ask that you bless our babies, dear God.
Yes.
Because that's the reason why we're here.
Yes.
Dear God, we ask in your name who created the heavens and the earth. And we say 3 times, amen, amen, amen. Thank you, everyone.
I love it. Let's go, 3 of us.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much.
I love to take it with your camera.
Wait, you know what? I took my cover off.
I love the book United. I just finished it.
I'm so grateful for you reading it.
It was very, very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
My story is I'm a
mixed race. I was a mixed race child raised in the only black family in an all-white town in Polk County. And so, you know, I felt some sort of kindredness of spirit with you and your story. And thank you. United, united.
Come on, again, you stay right where you were.
Oh, stay right where I was?
Yeah, now turn around. Turn directly around.
Wait, no, wait.
You see us there?
Oh, you see us? Wait a minute. Got it. Oh, all of us?
Thank you. I love your words, and I'm going to get your book.
Oh, thank you
you
very
so much. Thank you so much.
Hey, Senator. Actually, a native Washington. I'm going to take this over.
You're my longer selfie stick. Let me show you a pro tip. Okay. Don't use your front button. It's easier to do like this.
Okay. You wanted to get a quick tip. The CARE Act.
Yeah.
Do you support it? Just because opioid addiction just in our community. And so I just want to know, just really quickly, I know you don't have a lot of time.
It's all about resources. We know we have evidence-based models and things that work.
Family too.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thanks to you. Thanks for being here. I'm so grateful for your question. Thank you very much. Good. What'd you wear? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you all. Pleasure meeting you.
Thank you for going to stand up.
Oh, thank you. Of course. All right, you got it.
They tell me. I think just being left-handed.
I'm thinking about that, so I'm going to talk to him about something.
Yeah, we should have had a great time trying to go. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you so much for coming to see us.
I love your necklace. I remember it actually. I just want to see you again. Let's get another picture.
Yes,
Thank you guys. You are. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm from Jamaica. I grew up here. I moved to Baltimore for a couple years and I moved back.
I'm glad you're staying in the community.
Yes, absolutely. Is that right?
Yeah, come on, man. I got you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy listening to talk. Yeah, we'll try. Keep up all the hard work on TV.
Thank you for the search. It's so excellent. Thank you very much.
Senator Booker, how you doing, my man?
I'm grateful.
Hey, you need to come see me in Ames, man, because I know you're going to be up in Ames a lot.
You've been in Ames a lot. Okay.
We'll talk about this picture. I'm going to do the radio up there, my man.
We got to make sure we connect it. So when we're up in Ames, we do a show.
I do an FM community radio station. Chuck D's on my network.
We got to do that.
There needs to be a station identification at least. What's the information? My name's Merle, man.
Nice to see you again, Cory. Thanks for coming. Love everything you're doing, all your ideas. Definitely. Liz want to tell you bye. Till we see you again.
I want to send her something, so I want to make sure I have the right address. She's not McDonald. What's her last name?
Smith.
Smith. Okay.
But she is a McDonald.
Oh, I know.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Go see Carolyn today.
Yeah. So we cut our last event short so we had time to stop by.
All right. Best of luck at everything. Thank you. You're our next president.
My friend loves so much of homemade
you? Hey, Ayan, I'm going to hang up with you because I want to record a message for you, so you have it, okay? Hold on. Hold on, is this her? Oh, I thought it was great. Ayan, it's Cory Booker. It was great to see you very quickly. Thank you for your energy. That greeting you gave me on FaceTime really lifted me. So just wishing you all the best. I hope you get a chance to actually meet in person, not just over FaceTime. You've got a great friend here. Remember that. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Remember this flag?
Yeah.
And the one of solid flag, and our students come from JK University, and you sent this last time? Remember this flag?
Yes, sir.
Take a quick photo with our group. Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. This is your Cory Booker. Cory Booker.
This is not our.
Yeah.
He's the White House person.
Yeah. Okay. Come here. Come on. Also want to send autographs for my last photo with you. And also,
do you have an extra one that we can have?
Certainly. Okay, thank you very much. I will give you right back. I will give you a copy.
Senator Joe John Ward, and this is my wife, Connie Cook. Hi, Connie. And you know Jerry Crawford.
Yeah, I've signed up to volunteer.
Yeah, so do we.
He's one of those guys that encouraged me to run at a time I needed to do it.
Yeah. In '88, I was serving the Harkin State Administrator. And Jerry called me up almost every day because he was the Caucus's guy, and he would yell at me for about 20 minutes. And then once he said, "We got to go to lunch." I said, "Why?" He says, "Because you're the only guy that's ever handled it."
I love that story. Okay. Hold on one more second. We got to put you in the middle for one.
Yes, that's actually right there. In the white shirt.
It's not your first rodeo either.
Oh, no.
And we had a staffer with us.
Mitchell Smith. He lived with us all during the midterms, and then until last week. Yeah, we'll sign on with it.
Oh, God. I'm going to have to hug you for that.
But we've retired, so we'll come out of retirement a little bit.
I want to make sure we tell Jerry, these are Jerry Crawford's friends. I want to make sure we tell them that they're coming into Caucus. They'll be with us.
Not yet.
Okay, well, definitely.
How you doing, Cory?
I'm well, man. How are you?
I'm Elma's grandson, Cameron.
Great to meet you, brother. Great to meet you.
The master was so.
Oh, you got a 5-second countdown.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to turn that off.
Great to meet you, man.
It's great to meet you, man.
You gotta let me know how I can help. I almost got all my numbers. Okay.
Hey, Cory.
I love that.
I went online. I got everybody's trying to get my buttons. I'm like, no. How are you?
Thank God I'm well.
Good.
Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you send her some swag? She went online and bought this, but I want to send her some more buttons.
Oh,
Can you remember
thank
that?
you.
Yes. Because she's got people trying to steal them, and I want.
Yeah, I'm ready to sell them.
Yeah, get her information.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, I'm in D.C. the 28th to the 30th.
Of this month?
This month for the People's Action Conference.
I'm there. When do I get back? We get back on the evening of Tuesday. Okay, so can you guys exchange information?
Yes. I just want to see your office.
I want you to come to my office.
I would love to.
Okay, so good. So we can work that out.
Okay, so have a good happy birthday. Happy 50. I got you by 5 years.
All right.
Alma's wearing this shirt that you are.
You guys rock. Thank you, man. Oh, I'm so grateful for you all. Thank you.
I really appreciate a lot of the stuff you said, so I really like it.
I'm so encouraged by it. Thank you. Can we take a big selfie?
Yes.
Should we do individuals or should we do one-on-one? Or group?
You're going to be
on our AP Gov board, so we got all take one together.
All right, I love that. I want to know who your AP teacher is. Who's the AP teacher?
Ann LaPetra.
LaPetra?
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Hi, Miss LaPetra. It's Cory Booker. I'm here with some of your awesome students. First of all, they encourage me and inspire me, but I want to thank you for encouraging them, not just to know their history, know their government, but to serve their country, to be leaders. I'm grateful for everything you do to empower them to succeed in life and make their contribution. I hope to meet you one day in the future, and I wish you all the best. Thanks for being a great team.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to show that to her tomorrow. Thank you so much.
You guys. Thank you.
Best of luck to you.
I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah.
No worries.
May I have to read you? I want to like.
Wow. I guess my day is still we can surround me.
Hello to everyone. Wishing you the best. Thank you.
Thank you. One more time for me. Last time, October. Remember October in the Capitol?
I do. I remember.
Swallow yet? I'm swallow yet.
Just hello to everybody. It's great to be here with my friend again. I see him, it seems, every time I'm out here. Yes. Wishing you the best.
You are the best.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you. Thank you.
Brian Wenzel, KUI Radio.
Actually, can I get a 1-second video? I'm not going to be in class tomorrow. I have to miss class to cover this.
Video teacher.
Professor Parrish.
Hey, Professor Parrish, this gentleman here is missing class, but he's doing it for a good reason. We're hanging out. So wishing you all the best and hope to get a chance. Hope to get a chance to meet you in the future. All the best. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Hit this one again for me, Cory.
You got it, my friend.
All right.
County Supervisor. That's right.
That was Northwest Iowa. That's very good. Good.
That's right.
Include her seen tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, then you would change those too. Nice. Nice.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Hello. How are you? Good to see you too. Yes, you too. Thank you, Risha. And Royce Ann, have you met?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
My favorite, I'm not saying this, favorite leaders, elected leaders in all of the country.
I just had the pleasure to meet her, so that was, I followed her race, which was amazing and incredible. And
He endorsed me. He made a video telling people to go vote for me. He was there for me. And guess what?
you told take our picture because we got to get a picture. Oh,
let me do
take
it.
that. Okay. All right. Yeah, you can send your number in because everything's all listed in my phone right now.
Come on in this picture.
Come on, Tony.
Thank you.
I am tiny. It's my mom's old one. And look at how many cracks.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Did he read my mind?
Yeah, I know. I can.
I mean, how did you know I wanted in that picture so bad?
Don't nobody get their cell phone number. You don't just give your cell phone number out to anybody.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Text me. Yeah, text me.
Okay, so I want to get a picture, but I want to ask you a question. What is your plan to proactively deal with sexual harassment in your campaign?
When these happen, the Senate always got to be proactive on the issue. So not only are we making sure that everybody that we're influencing the campaign goes through
She's asking a question.
Have my leaders be aware of what they need to do to see signs of it and see people who are abusing, and then act quickly, swiftly, people who are doing this.
Okay. Will you have a written policy?
We have a written policy in my office. I'm sure we have a written policy, but we should make sure. Make sure we do sexual harassment policy. Yeah, we do. You took the training, right? Yes. Yes. So yeah, you want to see it, you can see it as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm asking everybody because it's just, well, I personally have experienced sexual harassment in the campaign space as a candidate, as an advocate, and it's really upsetting because you don't have anybody that you can report it to. I mean, just like, you know, Flores, the woman from Nevada who had been through an experience with Joe Biden, you know, you feel like there's nobody that you can talk to, and there's no accountability whatsoever. And so I've made it my mission to try to talk to every single presidential candidate to ask them what their policy is, because there's so many women that work particularly on the Democratic side in the political campaign space. So we give our labor, but then oftentimes have to put up with really horrible behavior, and there's no accountability and no reporting mechanism. So. Good answer. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, as a mayor of the city, you have to deal with. Culture that I inherited. So really,
I loved your book.
my book.
I listened to it on audio tape, read in your beautiful voice, and I told Rishi, I said, I smiled immediately when I heard it because of your beautiful New Jersey accent.
Thank you for being generous.
No, it was great because it made me think of Rishi. So yes. Let's do a selfie and then you can talk to everybody else in the entire world here who is excited to see you. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. I have nothing to say.
Yes, thank you. It's good to see you again.
You should actually take it back.
You have nothing to say to me.
I've been complaining a lot today, so I decided to just decided to be quiet.
Absorbed all of it. I said I thought I had absorbed all of it.
Yeah, he took it all.
Come on, let's get it.
With the bottom. Like, not the king president.
I know.
That's why I said she was. Yeah, she just did. And I haven't slept in days, so thank you.
All right. I hope you get some rest.
I hope you get some rest, but my intern asked this before we stand. So how do we
Okay. Africans in Iowa. Okay, absolutely. Okay, Senator Booker, he's talking to you about that.
Want to get you with the principal.
Yes.
Okay, please. I'm so grateful for you. Nice to meet you as well.
I'm grateful for you. Also, I want to share this picture. My maternal great-grandparents and
Thanks very much.
So, yes, it's my great-grandparents. So I wanted to share that. I know. They may have. Okay. Whatever.
All right. Well, I'll also bring the gin.
Don't go anywhere, sir. How you doing? I'm well. I wanted to meet with my wife. You gotta get me in her good graces. Come on over. This is my love.
Let's get this.
Okay, let's do this selfie.
You are definitely in the middle. You're the center of attention.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Definitely involved.
Thank you.
Oh wait, she wanted.
Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
Oh, Jada.
Jada gets her selfie.
Let's do this here. You're on the side.
Really ready to enjoy this time. Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Senator Booker, she want to get a picture of two of us if you don't mind.
Why doesn't she want to be in the picture?
I do. Well, let me take a picture. Let me get you guys in there together.
This is a good picture for me.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Love you.
Yes.
I want to take one of my own phone.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I left my phone in the car.
Oh man, cousin.
You have to text that picture.
I will. I'll send it to you. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, do you have folks you want us to see over there?
Yeah, right, the volunteer.
We gotta cut out that one.
Okay.
We don't have the volunteers to see out here tonight. It's my family right here. Come on, Jerry. Come on, Jerry.
Okay.
Tyreek. Tyreek, go up.
Thank you. Come on, let me get the No, it doesn't. That's good camera. Look how good we look.
Sorry. Do you have my Oh my God, here she goes.
To your mom? What's her name?
Dion.
Dion?
Yeah, Dion.
Dion, it's Cory Booker. I'm here with your awesome daughter. Thank you for all the light and the love you give her and this world. Thank you for raising such a servant leader. And I look forward to meeting you in the future. Take care now. God bless you. Bye-bye. All right.
Montana, get up there.
Come on, man. We got this.
Thank you. And if you have
Michelle, did you get in here?
Michelle, so you were talking kind of the wealth gap and things of that nature, and I feel like a lot of things with the wealth gap also is like minorities. They don't have time to own their own businesses, and discrepancy with that. So a lot of the times we're the ones in the jobs and not creating the jobs. So how do you feel you can, encourage entrepreneurship and encourage?
Two things. So the baby bond bill that I said you give every 18-year-old coming from low income up to $50,000 to start a business. But then number two, a lot of this is access to capital. So we're going to be rolling out in May a big entrepreneurship and business sort of program for small businesses. And that's going to include having more equality and access to capital, as well as doing the kind of things that are capital. There's 3 metropolitan areas that get most of the venture dollars in our country. We need to start seeing it more equally applied. Okay. So stay tuned in May. We're going to have a big, robust rollout of our small businesses and equal access to capital. All right, man. Thank you. All right. How are you?
Good. How are you?
What's your name?
Hannah.
Hannah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks. Yes, please. Oh, here we gotta flip it. There we go.
Come on, I know what I'm doing on Snap.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for all your help.
No, thank you. We got 2 more.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
Michaela's intern. You remember me?
Come on. We sat and had, yes, we sat and had a meal together.
We did?
Well, we're not really. How did I eat them?
You were listening to
Good to see you again. I like those. Really impressed with you.
Really?
Yes.
I have a lot to talk about, but I think we should meet up again and talk about it.
Okay. Okay.
Where's the like picture? Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Brandon. Brandon? Cory. Nice to meet you as well.
It's new.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, the road tank. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are you always going to take pictures from afar?
Well, yeah. I'm Ashley. I'm your digital director here. Yeah.
So you all just take pictures? Yes.
All right, there we go.
Surprisingly fantastic. I did not expect to hear a message about love and togetherness. I'm really not much involved in society. I grew up, I never said the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't feel like I could pledge myself to something that treated people so foreign. But in the last years, I've worked in healthcare. Right now I'm a bartender and I service a lot of veterans. And to see the struggles they go through, just the daily built-in struggles holding people down is soul-crushing. I've spent the last 3 years trying to develop any way that I can help give back to the community. We are stronger if everybody around us is that much better off. And I have no power. I hide away from everybody. But
don't underestimate your power.
I advocate. I'm sorry. Please continue.
No. I just think don't underestimate your power. Individuals have made powerful difference. Like one guy on the couch that I told you about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to advocate for healthcare. I'm studying every day to learn about even breathing techniques, alternate healing that you don't need to go to a hospital. You can empower yourself to take control of your own health and try to figure out for myself so I can give that to others. And to see that someone is advocating for togetherness and compassion and love instead of the things that separate us, your party versus mine. If I'm winning, you're losing. If you're winning, then I must be losing, is a terrible message. And I just wanted to thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Can I ask you, is that a Pokemon?
It's actually a chocobo. It's a Final Fantasy, so it's a video game still, but
I love that.
Thank you so much. Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
So much.
Thank you.
It's going to take me 3 hours.
Jersey!
You can Senator, we gotta roll this way. We're a little bit behind.
I know it's supposed to be.
Yes.
I love that you're wearing
I
it.
love it. Ain't that beautiful? So much.
Can I get a pen real quick? A Sharpie?
We're those autograph guys.
And since you got a Sharpie, guess what?
What's that?
Duh.
Like, it still freaks me out. I just it's not parked here. Really, it's cool. There's a small literally, that is.
I signed all three. Right here?
Anywhere, okay, where?
I feel like I want to do it the way you can read it.
The whole way. Now I will say this, the road that gets to the studio last night. Oh, yeah. I might not make it, but my car is short. So there's a lot of them. That's the only really, like, you know. That's surprising. I would think that they were like, right. That's funny. Yeah.
You are awesome. Cory, can you date it, please?
What's that?
Can you date it?
Yes. Today's the 16th? Yes.
It is.
I know, I've seen it.
You want to
I got the year for a second.
It's great lipstick on your lips too that I'm going to have. There you go. We're going to rub it in.
Oh, yeah.
You in the birthday.
I was letting it ride out. I like that. Training in? Yeah.
No, not at all.
Right here. Got it? There you go.
Thank you. Have a blessed night.
I'll check in with you soon.
I loved it. We are right.